All right, guys, this is the August 2015 Algebra 2 Trig exam. That is the last practice test in your packet before the 100 things you need to know before the Algebra 2 Trig Regents exam. I'm going to do work off of the large copy of it, not the shrunk down one like you guys have. But first, let me put up all the answers for you to check, including the part 1. So there's all the answers. If you want to check all of them, I would suggest you pause the video and check them now so that I don't have to make the video really long. So pause and check your answers. I'll be splitting up the video into part 1 and then the open response later. So this first video will show the multiple choice solutions. The second video I'll do the open response. Okay. So very first question, what are the zeros of the polynomial function? The zeros are where the graph intersects the x-axis, which would be -3, -1, and 2, choice 1. Here, if we have a correlation coefficient of 0.91, our best possible option for correlation coefficient is any number closest to positive or -1. So in this case, 0.91 is very close to positive 1, which means there is a strong relationship, about a 91% match between the data. Oops, I went too far. Number 3. What is the value of that when x is 16? Absolutely no reason to get this wrong, because you can just do this in your calculator. Is that actually a minus? No, it's not. It's a plus. Sometimes my computer prints this weird. X to the -1/4. So again, plug in 16 and just plug this in your calculator exactly the way you see it. Should you know how to do this by hand? Yes. 16 to the 1/2 power is the same as square root of 16, which is 4. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 16 to the -1/4 is the same as 1 over 16 to the positive 1/4, which is the same as 1 over the 4th root of 16, which is 2. 16 plus 1 is 17. 17 plus a half is 17 and a half. Let me pause this for a second. The windows are open and they are rattling all around. Hold on. Okay, so back to number 4. If you look at the choices in number 4, they all are, geez, my computer keeps going too far. They all are written with exponents instead of with a radical. So we need to remember our rule of anytime you have a radical, this number becomes the denominator of the exponent. So for example, 81 was to the first, but the 4 becomes the denominator of that exponent. X squared, the 4 becomes the denominator of that exponent. Y to the 5th, the 4 becomes the denominator of that exponent. This you could do in your calculator, or know that 4th root of 81 is 3, so not that or that. X to the 2/4 simplifies to x to the 1/2. Y to the 5/4. So, choice 1. Number 5, find the exact value of cosecant 120. Worst case, you could try to do this in your calculator, but you'd have to plug in 1 over sine 120. Make sure you're in degree mode. It's going to give you a random decimal, but you can check that random decimal with all these. I'll show you. So this is not the best way of doing this, but it would work. Make a fraction. 1 over sine 120. 1.547, etc. Well, obviously that's not this or this, and it's not negative, so it sort of forces it to be 2 square root of 3 over 3. But the correct way of doing that is to draw a triangle in the second quadrant, right, 120 degrees, which means that our reference angle would be 60 degrees. Opposite the 60 is square root of 3 over 2. Opposite the 30 is a half, and the hypotenuse is 1 if we're working on the unit circle. So this point on our unit circle, we're going left and up, would be -1/2, positive square root of 3 over 2. To find cosecant, we need the reciprocal of sine. Well, sine is square root of 3 over 2. So cosecant will be 2 over square root of 3, but can't leave that square root of 3 in the denominator, so we need to rationalize it, and that's where that comes from. Okay. But again, be smart about using your calculator. Number 6, which statement about the roots is true? Talking about the product, sum. Should remember the formula. Sum of the roots is negative b over a. Product of the roots is c over a. Well, our sum then, the opposite of 9 is negative 9 over 3 is negative 3. Product of the roots, and let me make sure that this didn't type this weird again. No, it is a minus. C over a, which is negative 4. Product of the roots is negative 4. That is true. Be careful that it doesn't put the not there and try to trick you. This one says which one is true, so choice 2. Number 8. Arc cosine just means inverse cosine. It's a fancy way of writing inverse. So, again, could do this in your calculator. Tangent of inverse cosine of 15 over 17. Close that parenthesis, close that parenthesis. 0.533, let's go to math. Enter, turn it back to a fraction. 8/15. Look how easy that was. Now, again, you should know how to actually do this. If we know that cosine is going to give us 15 over 17. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent would be 15, hypotenuse would be 17. If we want to find this side, we could do Pythagorean theorem. And that's what gives us a side length of 8. So now we want the tangent of that. For tangent, we need opposite over adjacent. That's where 8 over 15 comes in. Number 9, we have a table. What is the population standard deviation to the nearest hundredth? This is all calculator work. Take your calculator, go to stat, go to edit, clear out anything that's in there. Enter the two lists. Make sure you don't make any mistakes. Go back to stat, over to calc, one var stats. I have data in list 1 but also in list 2, so I need to have those both filled in. Press enter. And it said population standard deviation, right? Population standard deviation is right here. Sample standard deviation would be the SX. We want population and we want it to the nearest hundredth. 1.11 is there. Be careful to round correctly. That 1 gets rounded up to a 2 because of the 6. 1.12. 1 var stats. Number 10, what is the 20th term of this sequence? So we know that we have a first term of 10, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth term of 40. Right, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So we could do this with some common sense. We know this is an arithmetic sequence, which means it's based on addition or subtraction. We have gone a total distance of 30 from 10 to 40. But we've done that over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 additions. So that means each addition is 6, so our common difference is 6. So that would make that 16, 22, 28, 34, and 40, right? Makes sense? Now, you could have done that algebraically as well, using your sequence formula that we're about to use now. But now we want the 20th term. Formula for an arithmetic sequence is take the first term plus the common difference times n minus 1. Well, our first term, we're trying to find the 20th term. Our first term is 10. We just figured out our common difference is 6. We want the 20th term, so plug in 20. When you plug that into your calculator, that's what gives you your answer of choice 3, 124. Okay. Number 11. Big, long paragraph. They tell you what all the variables are equal to. Let's start to substitute in. It says he deposits $50. So that's our P value, the initial amount invested. 1 plus. Our rate is 3.25%, move the decimal 2 to the left, so 0.0325. And this is being compounded quarterly. Quarterly means 4 times a year. We're going to do this for 12 years. Plug that into your calculator. Make sure you don't mess up. Use the fraction key, especially to type that in. And when you plug that in, you should get answer choice 2. Okay. Number 11, how many distinct ways can you arrange the word Tallahassee? Well, Tallahassee has 11 letters, 11 total letters. But there's some repeats. We've got 2 L's, 2 A's, 2 E's, and 2 S's. I think I messed up somewhere. I have 3 of something here. 3 A's. Where did I miss an A? Oh, right here. So 3 A's. Sorry about that. And 2 S's. So in the denominator, we would have 2 factorial, 3 factorial, 2 factorial, 3 factorial. I'll remind you how to type that in. Make a fraction. 11 math PRB. Factorial is the 4th thing down. Over 2 math PRB, 4th thing down. 3 math PRB, 4th thing down. 2 math PRB, 4th thing down. I wrote this wrong. 2 S's. Jeez, I mean 2 mistakes on this question. The only thing that had 3 was the A's. So one more 2. Math PRB, 4th thing down. 831600, choice 1. Number 13, we got to figure out whether or not order matters. If we're choosing toppings for our pizza, the order does not matter, so we're going to use a combination. We have 9 toppings to choose from. We want to choose 3 of them. Plug that in your calculator. Same thing, it's in the PRB menu, and the answer is 84. Okay. Number 14, easiest thing to do here is to take this equation and rewrite it in terms of x. 2x squared plus x minus 1 equals 0, rather than having the word sign there. When you factor this, you end up getting 2x minus 1 and x plus 1. Okay, you could do that by doing the factor by grouping. What adds to 1 but multiplies to negative 2, split it up, cut it in half, factor by grouping. So this ends up giving you 1/2 and negative 1. Now, x was never really x was sine, so we need to figure out when sine of x is 1/2 and when sine of x is negative 1. If we want sine to be positive 1/2, we could be working in the first or second quadrant. Now, if we do inverse sine of 1/2, it'll tell us what our reference angle is, 30 degrees. So this is a 30-degree angle. This is 150. So I know I need 30 and 150. Now none of the other ones have 30 and 150, so I should know that the answer is this. Where's this 270 coming from? Well, if we look at our unit circle, 1 is sine negative 1. Oh, not there. Right here. If I go to that point on my unit circle, I'm at 0, negative 1. Sine is the y value, so at 270 degrees, sine is negative 1, choice 2. Again, you could use your calculator to do this. Instead of 2 sine squared, you could do 2 sine 30 times sine 30. All right, sine squared means sine 30 times sine 30. And then plus sine 30 minus 1. And it gives you 0, so you know 30 works. You could try the same thing with 150, etc. So you could try plugging each one in. What about 15? If we drew sine 230, 230 would put us into the 3rd quadrant. But in the 3rd quadrant, sine would be negative. So I know it's not this or this, because in the 3rd quadrant, sine is negative. This one should have a negative with it as well. So it's either choice 1 or choice 2. If I draw an angle of 230 degrees, what's my reference angle? How much have I passed 180 degrees by? 50, so that's why my answer is choice 2. We're in the third quadrant, sign should be negative, not positive, and 50 is our reference angle. But, again, plug this in the calculator, plug this in the calculator. Those are the only two things that give you the same exact answer. Number 16. Which equation represents a circle with a center at 2, -3, and that passes through this point? Well, this part of it should let you eliminate some of the choices. You need it to say -2 + 3. So not this, not this. Okay? So we're down to two choices. These are equal signs. This should be equal to the radius squared. Well, if my circle is centered at 2, 3 and goes through the point 6, 2, I can actually find my radius by either using Pythagorean theorem, right? We went from an x value of 2 to an x value of 6, so that's 4. We went from a y value of 3 up to a y value of 2. That doesn't make any sense, but to -3. Okay. From y value of -3 up to a y value of 2, which is 5. And if you do Pythagorean theorem, you get square root of 41 for the hypotenuse. Or use your distance formula. Plug in the x's and the y's, and it would still give you square root of 41. But because the equation of a circle should equal the radius squared, not just the radius, our answer is choice 3. Number 17, the domain of that function. Domain is x. Is there any x value that I cannot plug in right there? There's really not. Every single x value works, so that's why our domain is -infinity to +infinity. We could type in negatives, we could type in positives, we can type in any sort of x values. Our range will have some restrictions. Let's look at our graph. Come on. So do you see how our graph goes all the way from -infinity to +infinity? We could also look at our table. There's no restrictions for the x's. I can go to all the negative x's. I can go to all the positive x's. Okay. There are some restrictions for the range. As we start to scroll down, you see how the numbers go from -0.667 to -0.889. They get smaller and smaller and smaller. But right here, we're not actually hitting -1. It's a little deceiving. The reason it says -1 is because there's so many 9s there that they're rounding each other to -1, but it's not actually happening. So there is a restriction in the range. If it asked for the range, it would be this. But the domain, we could do anything. 18, we need to rationalize. So we need to multiply numerator and denominator by square root of 3. 3 square root of 3 minus square root of 24 over square root of 9, which is just 3. Square root of 24 we can rewrite. 4 goes into it. And square root of 4 is 2. 4 times 6. So we can't simplify that. That's it. 3 square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 6 over 3. Problem is, I don't see that there. Well, let's see what happens if we put each part over 3. 3 square root of 3 over 3 minus 2 square root of 6 over 3. Well, now we can cross those out. Square root of 3 minus 2 square root of 6 over 3. Well, that's this. What is the period of that graph? You guys should remember that the frequency times the period is 2 pi. Well, the frequency in this case is 2 times the period is 2 pi. Divide, divide. The period is pi. And last couple. First four terms of a sequence are defined by a sub 1 equals 1/2 and a sub n equals 1 minus a sub n. So what this is saying is to find any term, right, the n plus 1 term, to get to the next term, you're always doing 1 minus the nth term, which is the previous term to the n plus 1 term. So if our first term is 1/2, you can literally plug into here to find the second term. We'll plug in a 2 right here and a 2 right here. Oops, not a 2. We don't need that. We need a 1 right here and a 1 right here. So 1 plus 1 is 2. To find a sub 2, we're doing 1 minus a sub 1, which in this case would be 1 minus a half, which is a half again. So we know our second term should be a half. The only one that has a second term of a half is this. If we're always going to the previous term and doing 1 minus that previous term, well, if our first term is a half, 1 minus that gives us a half again. Then 1 minus this gives us a half again. 1 minus that gives us a half again. So choice 1 is the answer. Okay, number 21 is going to require me to use my normal distribution curve. So I'm going to switch sheets to my formula sheet. Oops, too far. And let's see, what did they tell us? There's some marks on here, sorry about that. What did they tell us about this problem? They told us that the mean was 82, so that goes in the middle. Standard deviation is 3.6. So here's the first full standard deviation. We're going to add 3.6, 85.6. And then the next full standard deviation will add 3.6 again, which will get us to 89.2. What do we want in the question? Assume a student score of 91, so we haven't gotten there yet. If we do a whole nother standard deviation, that would get us to 89.2, 3.6, 9, 11, 12, 92.8. Now, somewhere in between there, we must have gotten to 91. If a full standard deviation is 3.6, a half standard deviation will be 1.8. Well, 89.2 plus 1.8 would get us to our 91 right here, 2.5 standard deviations above the mean. We want to know what ranking that is, what percentile ranking that is. Well, only these people did better than you if you're right there. Only 0.6% of the people taking this test or whatever this is, standardized exam, did better than you. So you are definitely above the 95th percentile, choice 4. Okay. Go back. And 22, we need to use our reference sheet. Cosine 2 theta has 3 things we can use as the double angle formula. But knowing what cosine is equal to tells me I should probably use the formula that deals with cosine. Instead of 2 cosine squared minus 1, we can do 3/4. You should be able to do this by hand, but don't trust yourself. At least check your work on the calculator. 3/4 squared is 9/16. 2 times that is 18/16. Minus 1, which is 16/16. 2/16, which is 1/8. Okay. The other thing you could have done, if you know cosine theta is 3/4, you could do inverse cosine of 3/4. Get an angle for theta, double that angle, find cosine of that, because it says cosine of double the angle, 0.125, math, enter, enter. Did all that in the calculator. Doesn't always work out so nicely, but in this case it did. Number 23. Which statement is true? We talk about inverses, not inverses for the function the function and its inverse. Well, if this is the function m, its inverse means we would have to flip all the points. 1, -1, 1, 1, 4, -2, 4, 2, because inverse means switch x and y, 9, -3, and 9, 3. Well, m, do we have any repeated x's? No, so m is a function. M and its inverse are both. M is a function. M is not a function. That's wrong. Neither are a function. That's wrong. So m is definitely a function. Is m inverse? Do we have any repeated x's there? Yeah, 1's repeat, 4's repeat, etc. So m is a function, but the inverse is not a function. And the last multiple choice, actually it's not the last multiple choice, we have a couple. Square root of -180 x to the 16th. Well, let's make 2 radicals. -180, we can split up in -36 times 5. X to the 16th is a perfect square. Square root of -36 is 6i. Square root of x to the 16th is x to the 8th. 5 is going to be left under the radical, so that is choice 4. Number 25, the 9th term of this expansion. So the 9th term means we would start with 15C0 and have to count all the way till we get to the 9th term. Well, this is the first. 15C1 would be the second, So 15C8 would start the ninth term. You see how this is always one less? In the first parenthesis, we'd put our a value, which is 3x. Second parenthesis is our b value, which is 2y. This a value would start to the 15th power and have to count down, right? 14th, etc. The b value would start to the 0 and have to count up. Well, it's going to match with this. So that's going to be 8. This is going to end up being 7. You could map it all out if you want to. I'm just trying to save myself some time. So that gives me choice 3. Number 26, which expression represents the total number of handshakes? 6 people met at a party and they all shook hands once with everyone there. So order doesn't matter here. I don't want to count me shaking person A's hand and then person A shaking my hand. That's counting it as twice, and it's only really one thing. So of the 6 people, we want to choose how we can do combinations of 2. Figure out what this equals in your calculator, which it equals 15. Figure out what each of these equal in your calculator. That's the only one that matches up. And the last one. What value of k would make that a perfect square trinomial? Well, we have to take half of this middle term. Half of 1/4 is 1/8. And then we got to square it, which would give us 1/64. Okay, that's just a little step of completing the square. So that's all the multiple choice. I'm going to do a separate video for the open response. But if you have to go back to any of them and rewatch the work that I did, feel free. If you have any pressing questions, feel free to message me on Remind 101.